I think everybody likes science. They just have to figure out what kind of science they like.
We've got rovers on Mars and probes traveling off in the solar system and beyond the solar system. We're unlocking the secrets of genetics and life. This affects all of us, and anything we can do to increase that in the world, I think that's valuable.
You always have to sell something. As academics, we're often so far removed from that idea that we could be selling something. And that is such a limiting, problematic mindset that we just instantly feel bad when we ask somebody to give us something back for the value that we provide. I think that really limits a lot of people from actually acknowledging their value in the first place.
Representation can look like so many different things. Bringing all these different people together, especially these days with the internet, I've seen so many great people on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram sharing their stories in really creative ways. And these days you can go in and look up what's the day in a life of someone who's in grad school. And you can find all these different people sharing their stories and see if that's the right path for you and get a taste of it that wasn't necessarily accessible before.
I have to share that over the last year, we've interviewed some of the most innovative educators, scientists, policy writers, industry professionals, entrepreneurs in science. Looking back through the recordings, I was noticing a lot of key takeaways and trends in the science industry that I thought were worth highlighting. You'll note that we even put the questions and answers that each guest has asked of each other. And I think those questions and answers in themselves reveal a lot about what is and what is to come in the field of science. So let's dive in.
My name is Dr. Carmen Banks. I'm a cell and molecular biologist by training. I'm also founder and CEO of Melanin Science, which is a workforce development company creating pathways for underrepresented students and early career professionals into biotech and biopharma careers.
I am Zach Valdez. I am a academic industry nonprofit expert. I've been in the Senate, national nonprofits, and then multiple federal agencies, including a stint with the former administration as the chief of staff for the Department of Energy.
In a funding landscape where it is extremely hard for folks of color and women to fundraise, what can folks do to help diversify the landscape, and what advice would he give to folks of color or folks who historically have not had as much opportunity to get the same amount of funds?
I would say there are organizations that support minorities in the manufacturing sector, which is abroad. I would say in science policy, we have affinity groups in DC that support science policy folks that maybe don't have a voice. And so I would say that's one part of it, because there is a large cohort of us that feel like, one, we're underrepresented in science, and then maybe two, we're even more underrepresented in science policy.
My name is Stephanie Passos. I'm an assistant professor of teaching of chemistry and biochemistry, and also the co-owner and chief scientist at Heroica Technology.
My name is Checo Colon Gaud. I am a professor of biology at Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia.
I'm curious, how are you navigating recent changes with funding for your graduate students as an associate dean in your college?
It's a little bit debilitating, I guess, when we see grants and support get canceled, or when we see opportunities for students disappear. This is an important time for us to be mentors more than supervisors and make sure that the support that we're providing, it has to go beyond financial support. Financial support could certainly provide a lot of resources, open doors, and provide opportunities. But I think the role that we have as mentors is way beyond just provided with financial support, providing the intellectual resources that go a little bit beyond just what we could get with financial support, but also getting a lot more creative about the ways that we do our work. There are certainly challenging times now in terms of federal financial support and maybe even other avenues as well, but getting creative and thinking of ways that we could continue to do our work, whether it is by making sure that the institution maintains particular values and knowing the importance of supporting our students in any way that we can, providing avenues or access to other resources, whether it is private or just creative use of resources that we already have in place at our institutions. I know it's challenging when you want to continue to push and grow the research mission of your institution and at the same time see your faculty and your students encountering barriers in the way that they support their work. And at the same time, encountering barriers even in the ways that they want to make sure that they have a safe and as normal a life as possible, whether it's outside of the institution and their work. That's where we have to be present. We have to make sure that we are maintaining our commitment as mentors, and that goes beyond just somebody as a supervisor or as a sponsor. It's just really being there with the mentorship, being there to have those difficult conversations when they need to be had, and being there to provide guidance and support that goes beyond the monetary, even if it's just a friendship and emotional support, to make sure that they're continuing their pathway and they're continuing to grow and getting degrees and progressing in the field.
I'm David Ibbett. I'm an assistant teaching professor at Worcester Polytechnic Institute of Music, and I direct the Multiverse Concert Series, which is a non-profit that integrates music and science in live performance.
What inspired David to not just bring this to the forefront, and maybe what inspires the way that he connects science with music, but just thinking about how did that really become an idea or spark the idea of going, wow, this is going to be the way that I'm going to have science or even this idea shared with a much broader audience through music. Music is already inspiring enough, but now to put this complex ideas and maybe get a chance to have more people connect to it, I just wonder what inspired him to do that and where does the inspiration come from?
I'm not sure quite when I decided to be a composer. It's the kind of thing that creeps up on you, where you just notice where the passion is and you're being driven to do late nights when you're on a roll creating something. And we just had a series of moments where things clicked. I mean, the first time we had a scientist come to a concert called Beauty from Nothing, and we had a scientist come and talk about the multiverse and how you might test for the multiverse, Matt Claiborne from NYU. And we had him give his lecture in the middle of the concert. And it just worked. We felt that the music and the science were united by this excitement and this curiosity over these existential questions, but also they completed each other. They together formed this complete experience across different ways to explore our world. I think that meant that we just had to keep doing it. So everything we did after that, we were bringing in scientists to be part of the concert. I think realizing it definitely came from a place of let's make the most compelling experience that we can, and then figuring out, well, actually, that can really help society. How can we fine tune it so that happens? As an artist, you're driven to create something that is inspirational in some way. And maybe you don't necessarily have to question that and figure out its utility. But at a certain point, that reflection, you realize who it's valuable to. I really want this work to be impactful and make a difference because I love music and I love science, and I think they make the world a better place. But we have a real problem of distrust of science and lack of support for science and music as well, not being seen as valuable compared to STEM education. We've got rovers on Mars and probes traveling off in the solar system and beyond the solar system. We're unlocking the secrets of genetics and life, and we're understanding how the materials of our world do what they do and enable us to make everything that we use every day. This affects all of us, and I think anything we can do to increase that in the world, I think that's valuable.
I'm Matt Wilkins. I am an evolutionary biologist who taught middle school for a few years and then started an education studio called Galactic Polymath, which I've been running for about 4.5 years now.
I'm Jocelyn Bosley, and I wear a number of hats at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. My main gig is the Research Impact Coordinator. I'm also a Director of Education Partnerships on a newly funded NSF Global Center on food innovation and diversification to support the bioeconomy.
I would be very curious to know, what do you feel is the greatest impact that you've had through any of your projects? And what was the most fulfilling? And are they the same thing?
I was lucky enough to be selected as one of the 125 ambassadors funded by the Lyda Hill Philanthropies and organized by American Association for the Advancement of Science to provide role models for particularly middle school girls in STEM. There have been lots of opportunities that came about as a result of that, including a couple of different funding opportunities. There was a mini grant that I got. We took excerpts from some of the podcast episodes that I had recorded on Science with Friends, and an animator at UNL, Kurt Bright, who's amazing, turned me into a rainbow science unicorn, thus fulfilling a lifelong dream I never knew I'd had, but immediately was like, yes, this is the pinnacle. And so there was an animated series, and it was called Verbing Science. Verbing Science was inspired by an observation by Calvin of Calvin and Hobbes that verbing weirds language. And it sort of was my answer to what people typically talk about the process of science, at least in secondary science classrooms, is the scientific method. Not that all methods are scientific. There are lots of unscientific methods. There are certain attributes that methods are scientific have in common, but I think it does a great disservice both to science as it currently exists and to the future of science in terms of who finds themselves interested in and can see themselves in science, to pretend that all scientists do exactly the same thing in the same order all the time. As somebody who has had commitment issues and worked in a lot of different areas of science, I of course knew that this was not the case. And as a historian of science, studying the way science works, I think the strength of science is exactly in the fact that there is no unitary, monolithic scientific method. What's really exciting to see and how science progresses over time is multiple lines of inquiry and multiple strategies converging onto a solution. And that's when you get really powerful evidence that you're onto something. Talking earlier about how cool it was to me and how it really captured my imagination that imaginary numbers were sort of invented for one reason and then turned out to be super useful in other ways too. And I think that kind of a convergence or consilience of approaches is what makes science so strong. I get really excited about how the processes of science are much more diverse than students are typically led to believe. So I make an analogy to music too. Like when people say that they don't like science, to me, that's like somebody saying they don't like music. There are people who maybe just don't like to listen to music, period. But I think they are a very, very small minority, and most people like some kind of music or other. They don't like the same kinds of music. They may hate what I love and vice versa, but it would be weird to say they just hate music or they don't like music. And to me, that's what saying somebody doesn't like science is, because there are so many different kinds of science. There are so many different forms, styles, approaches. And so I think everybody likes science. They just have to figure out what kind of science they like. Coming back around to Matt's question, I would say something that has the most potential for impact, and it's new, is the Sci Journeys unit that I actually worked with Matt to launch. And that was originally envisioned as a unit that he would build where a lesson would be built around each of the Verbing Science videos. And what we ended up doing was something so much bigger and more awesome than I could have imagined, which was we created a unit and really a template for a way of thinking about science as this collection of sort of worlds that different scientists navigate differently. We put communicate right in the center. And so that is something that is not typically shown in the scientific method. But we also have other more familiar steps like asking questions, collecting data, analyzing data, interpreting data, actually inviting scientists to submit their sci journey to this competition. I think that this is going to be such a powerful opportunity to really show students all the different ways that science can look by saying how it looks for you and using our world map, our Sci Journeys world map to say, okay, well, I actually don't make hypotheses first because I'm doing more descriptive research. So I actually start with collecting data and I know kind of the general data that I want. And then I get some of this data and it gives me an idea for a good question. But I have to communicate in between. I have to talk to my team members about the data too before I know what kind of question I want to ask, that kind of thing. And we have some great example videos that Matt and one of his other colleagues put together just to kind of give people a flavor of how to do it. It's pretty unusual for folks to be able to have a SciComm award to put on their CV. There aren't a lot of them out there, so that's one of the perks, and we have cash prizes as well for the top 3 finishers. But the big exciting reward, in addition to those personal accolades, is contributing to this repository of videos that we hope will then go to classrooms everywhere and really help more students understand what authentic science really looks like and hopefully see themselves in science, figure out what kind of science they like instead of saying, I don't like science. So that's this project that I'm super excited about because it really brings together a lot of the threads of my experience. I hope will be an impactful format for students. In terms of the most rewarding, I would say the work with middle school students has actually been the most rewarding because I get that immediate feedback. I'm glad that I'm doing things that are a bit more broadly focused, that I'm creating things that can be implemented and used in a variety of settings because I know that that's going to enhance my impact in terms of the number of people that I can reach. But there's nothing like the depth of those one-on-one relationships to really let you know that you've done a good job. I mentioned the student that I worked with from second grade who recently graduated from Stanford. And we did a fun thing. It was fun, but it was also like a secret test. Our mentoring crew, our cohort, that I instilled after realizing that a lot of students, including students who are really, really good at math, would absolutely panic and forget everything they ever knew when they saw a fraction. Maybe some of you listening have experienced this as teachers or as parents, but that somebody can understand how to solve an algebraic equation perfectly. Then one of the coefficients is now like 2/3, and all of a sudden the world has ended and we don't know what to do anymore because they just didn't quite get proficient at, or they got proficient at it but then they forgot about it. Again, it's why I think I spend a lot of time thinking and working with them about like, why is multiplying by the reciprocal the same as dividing? That's just a thing that you learn that you did, but why does it work that way? And so we instigated Fraction Fu Friday, and we had different belts, and they each had little sensei paper dolls that they would add their belts to as they earned them. And it was always a timed thing because I wanted them to be really, really proficient. So it was a really high standard because, as I always told them, this is not about being good at fractions. This is about being a fraction ninja. Like, I want you to be able to do it in your sleep. But on the other hand, there was no pressure because there was not a grade. There was lots and lots of chances. And so the student who recently graduated from Stanford wrote me this wonderful letter reflecting on our experience together. He talked about how that was so good for him because it really helped him navigate the frustration of not getting everything right the first time, and his natural tendency toward perfectionism made him see that it's not going to all end if I don't do this. The standard is high, but it's okay. You can take as long as you need to meet it, and I'm going to help you, and we're going to do it together. That has increased his resilience so much in other areas of his life and in his academic work. It was exactly what he needed. How often does any teacher get to not only see and know privately that they had the exact impact that they were trying to have on somebody, but then have the student tell them, not just you had an impact on me, but this impacted me in this way, and it was exactly what I hoped would happen. I think that story really illustrates the rewardingness of those kind of one-on-one relationships.
I'm Colleen Kelly, and I'm the creator and founder of a comic book series. We have a series of comic books that scaffold the learning objectives found in a 100-level college chemistry course. So if you look at a traditional textbook for a Chem 101 at any college or university, what I've done is I've taken each of those chapters and created one comic book out of each chapter so that when you look at the chemistry comic books in tandem as a series, it is the equivalent of a college chemistry textbook, only in comic book format.
I'm Cesar Nufiel, and I work at BioInteractive. I develop online activities, films to help develop our animations.
How do you bring the scientific method inquiry into a descriptive discipline and a descriptive format, right? So how do you capture your audience with maybe a mystery or maybe a question that's unanswered to kind of build intrigue? As a scientist and you're working for HHMI, how do you bring that in there? How do you make it juicier and bring that kind of yummy science in there and differentiate your way of producing that way? A question that's unanswered to kind of build intrigue. As a scientist and you're working for HHMI, how do you bring that in there? How do you make it juicier and bring that kind of yummy science in there and differentiate your way of producing that way?
I think that one of the important things that we try to do at work is we try to figure out a phenomenon. So what is a driving phenomenon to begin with? So for example, we're making a film right now on addiction, and we've made films on sickle cell and things like that. And I think that have to have a phenomena that drives people to be interested in it, like students to be interested in. What do you know about addiction? It's a topic that students want to know more about. And so then with the phenomena, I think then you have to turn it over to the students and then have them generate questions. Like, what questions did you have about this? And then let them do the driving of this. There's an approach that sort of expresses this. It goes a little bit further, and that's the idea of an anchoring phenomena. So maybe you have a phenomena like addiction, and you start with a film about addiction, and then you go, well, what do you guys think? Write some questions, and we're going to share questions, and then we're going to go put them on this board. And then you organize them. Oh, these were all about genetics, right? Or causes of addiction, genetics, environment. And then people hear, like, what's happening in the brain? Okay, so this is molecular. Well, what's happening in chemistry? You separate those out. And then you go, great. So tomorrow we're going to talk about chemistry. And so in a way, you anticipate what questions the students are going to ask, what they're going to be curious about. You help drive those. And then the investigations and the other parts that come are really based on that inquiry or the interest that they themselves grow because they want to answer their own questions and not answering my questions. So I would say that an effective way is presenting a compelling phenomena, let them drive the inquiry, and then develop the activities so that they can find the answers to the questions that they're posing. I think that one of the important things that we try to do at work is we try to figure out a phenomenon. So what is a driving phenomenon to begin with? So for example, we're making a film right now on addiction, and we've made films on sickle cell and things like that. And I think that you have to have a phenomena that drives people to be interested in it, like students to be interested in. What do you know about addiction? It's a topic that students want to know more about. And so then with the phenomena, I think then you have to turn it over to the students and then have them generate questions. Like, what questions did you have about this? And then let them do the driving of this. There's an approach that sort of expresses this. It goes a little bit further, and that's the idea of an anchoring phenomena. So maybe you have a phenomena like addiction, and you start with a film about addiction, and then you go, well, what do you guys think? Write some questions, and we're going to share questions, and then we're going to go put them on this board. And then you organize them. Oh, these were all about genetics, right? Or causes of addiction, genetics, environment. And then people hear, like, what's happening in the brain? Okay, so this is molecular. Well, what's happening in chemistry? You separate those out. And then you go, great. So tomorrow we're going to talk about chemistry. And so in a way, you anticipate what questions the students are going to ask, what they're going to be curious about. You help drive those. And then the investigations and the other parts that come are really based on that inquiry or the interest that they themselves grow because they want to answer their own questions and not answering my questions. So I would say that an effective way is presenting a compelling phenomena, let them drive the inquiry, and then develop the activities so that they can find the answers to the questions that they're posing.
I'm a university research chair and professor at the University of Waterloo. I work in human-computer interaction. I help people with academic writing and artificial intelligence.
Sometimes mourning leave absolutely could be the most wonderful and important thing that we could have done for ourselves. I mean, we are going to be so much happier doing that, but it is hard because we're comparing ourselves to what we thought success was. So I would ask, what was the most important thing you had to unlearn in order to be able to leave?
I think the most important thing to unlearn was to feel bad about selling, basically. As academics, we're conditioned that we shouldn't sell anything. If you ever heard Dan Pink speak, he's an academic, a prolific one, but he's also a great entrepreneur and written really great books. And I think he says something like, everything is sales. Welcome to your life, everything is sales, basically. So you always have to sell something. And as academics, we're often so far removed from that idea that we could be selling something. And that is such a limiting, problematic mindset that we just instantly feel bad when we ask somebody to give us something back for the value that we provide. I think that really limits a lot of people from actually acknowledging their value in the first place. And of course, this starts with indoctrination during the PhD and other phases that we go through. that we really get pushed away from understanding that we're making a really valuable contribution to society. And that stuff should cost money. If a football player can ask for millions just for people to watch them play football, why shouldn't we ask for millions for people to see us do science or read the kind of output of our science, right? As a society, of course, there are challenges attached to that, but I think this is definitely one of the key things if you become an academic entrepreneur, to understand that people are always selling stuff. Yes, and as an entrepreneur, you're actually starting to ask for money for value. But even if you're just an academic and not an entrepreneur, you're still selling a paper, you're selling an idea, you're selling a concept, you're selling a program to a funder, you're selling your knowledge to your students in the classroom. Like, it's all a similar concept. So you got to embrace that.
I'm Jeff. I work as a marketing strategist at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry.
I'm Anissa. I am a computational genomics scientist by training. I do this sort of thing because I'm really passionate about science impact, particularly outside of academia.
I would ask Anissa, if she were to start a podcast, what would it be called and what kinds of people would she interview?
I recently came across this newsletter. It's called Forgive Me to the Folks if they ever actually hear this. I think it's called the Scholarly Newsletter. Two folks who really care about science and just talking about science. And they decided to create this newsletter that talks about just doing science for science's sake. And they've got this piece called the Scholarly Manifesto. I have it saved in my phone because it was just so profound for me and helped me understand a bit more of my purpose and my calling actually in this space. But the long and short of it is that they make two distinctions, one between the academic and the other being a scholar. The academic is someone who, by no sort of reason of her own doing, she has turned science into a product, like something to be manufactured, something that is attached to like certain success KPIs.
I am a business owner. I have a PhD in English. I work with universities to do academic skill development. I also work with government agencies and companies to do, in the world of AI, human skills training around communication, critical thinking.
I'm curious to know how she curates her learning material in a way that is receptive for diverse audiences. I would be very curious to know how she presents her material in a way that's receptive to scientists, to engineers, to administrative folks, like that sort of thing.
I research every audience and I try to talk to people in the discipline. So, for example, sometimes there's mixed audiences, but I do as much as my research as possible on the audience to be able to say, okay, if I'm going into a room of engineers or the person that invites me to do that particular session, I'll ask them, can you give me some documents? What are some of your style conventions? So I try to get as much data and information about conventions to that particular genre as possible. Or I'll ask for examples. Is there something they want us to work on? Can you provide some examples of those so I can review beforehand? Because what I have found in the work that I do, showing examples is the best way to help people grasp the concepts because typically only have an hour and a half. If my goal is to make sure that you understand a concept or principle or strategy and you're able to leave it applying it, then I accomplish that one of two ways. Either give me some examples that I can show before and after or work through during the session, or have them bring some works that they're working on and do that. So that's what I do in terms of audiences. Whatever audience it is, I have to educate myself first to understand how it may deviate or how it may apply to them. And then I incorporate those examples. I'll change the examples to make sure I'm using examples for that audience. Now, if it's a varied audience, which is often the case as well, like I was telling you, I have to go to university. They have something at University of Florida. It's called Grad Gators. I do a dissertation boot camp for them. And we do a big session where it may be 200 plus students across all disciplines, doctoral level and master's level. Then I'll pick a topic that I know can apply to everyone, like revision or the lit review or personalizing the writing process so that they can take a concept and have some type of structure and be able to apply it in whatever manner that works for them.
My name is Ayana Lynch. I am an early career professional. I've got about, or most recently, I work at the American Chemical Society in their outreach department, but I've been working in the science communication and science outreach space for about 5 years.
I've got a question from a previous guest. So Rakeem Marcel came to us and was talking about his role going from academia to industry. He was doing his own consulting thing for a period of time, and now he's supporting another organization. And his question was, so he mentioned the importance of exposing younger generations to a wide range of STEM career paths beyond just doctors and researchers. How do you think scientists and researchers can make their work more accessible and inclusive to diverse audiences, including those with different backgrounds, abilities, and perspectives?
I've been really fascinated with the idea of storytelling in science lately and just being able to, one, kind of exposing younger generations and underrepresented groups to STEM is just sharing your own story. Because I think right now we're at this really interesting point in STEM and kind of the workforce that we have where there are so many different types of people and so many different journeys that people have had to get to their career. But if you're a kid, you might not necessarily know that you have all these options. And everyone's story is so unique. If we're just focusing on demographics, we kind of miss a facet of their story because you might look exactly the same as me on the outside, but have a completely different journey. And so there's an opportunity to resonate with so many different people by sharing your unique story and sharing all the things that you've been through and all the opportunities that you've had and how you can share that and relate to people on multiple levels, not just demographic, because representation is so important. Representation can look like so many different things. I think that's how you really build a strong community is by bringing all these different people together, especially these days with the internet. I've seen so many great people on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram sharing their stories in really creative ways. And these days you can go in and look up what's the day in a life of someone who's in grad school. And you can find all these different people sharing their stories and see if that's the right path for you and get a taste of it that wasn't necessarily accessible before. Getting creative with how you share your own story is a really great way to expose all these different people, especially the younger generation.
I'm Paul Faranbi, aka Incredible Paul. My background is in chemical engineering. I work as an engineer still in research and development. I also run a nonprofit called NALA STEM. Our mission is to unite, support, and build community among all historically excluded peoples in STEM.
Our last guest was Amankai Kugler, who is a circus performer who loves to integrate science into her performances. Her episode was really cool, and she was really excited to ask you this question. I'm going to quote her verbatim. So I guess one of the questions I had in mind was, outside of your field or fields, in this case of expertise, what area do you most want to collaborate with? So if you're skilled at chemistry or leadership, do you want to collaborate with psychology, literature, performing arts, fine arts? And why do you think that would be useful for your methods and your message?
I have done a lot of stuff on the STEM side, but then I feel like I live in a few different worlds, and sometimes worlds collide. I'm very much in the STEM world, but I think collaborating more with people on the entertainment side of things would be interesting. I think I've started to do that with some people on the podcast, especially the STEAM side is more the entertainment side of things, because I know there's opportunities with making it more engaging and more fun. I already know this about myself. Things that I find fun, not everyone finds fun. As you collaborate with different people who have a different way of looking at things, especially on the content creation side of things, there's different things I've thought about doing more of because I don't like to take myself too seriously. A lot of the topics I talk about tend to be serious, so it's trying to balance it and make it more lighthearted. Doing more stuff entertainment side, collaborating with them more would be interesting and probably impact more people because leadership skills, life skills, soft skills, beneficial for everyone. if people can't resonate or connect with it as much, then it's harder to reach them.
Thank you so much for listening. We have some really interesting plans in store for you. One thing that the Science with Impact team is starting to integrate is 3D animation and simulation for chemistry. You're going to see a lot more development videos about how to overcome particular visualization challenges. You'll see some short videos explaining scientific concepts and different ways that you can engage with our team and how we can serve you. So I look forward to next year, and thank you so much for listening to our podcast.